I started volunteering.
It's all about who you know in sport.
Am I going to be calling the last 10 seconds of the grand final?
You can connect with the interviewer. The hand goes up when they've got to make a decision.
Having a network is one of the most important things you can do.
I didn't necessarily follow my passion. I followed my curiosity.
Once you've worked in sport, there's no going back.
And then lo and behold, before I left, I got offered two.
Hello and welcome to the Sports Grad Podcast, the ultimate guide to make it in the sports industry. Brought to you by Deakin University, home to the world's #1 sports science school. My name is Ruben Williams. I'm an ex-Cricket Australia employee who started Sports Grad to help others get their dream job in sport, and now it's become my own dream job. Purpose of this podcast is to help you get a job in sport, so if that's you, make sure you hit subscribe and I'll be in your ears every week with advice and interviews on how you can start living the dream in sport. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, today's backdrop is a little bit different because I'm coming to you from a friend's house in London. I have hung around after the London meetup last week over in Angel Islington, and a bit of an update on it. It was a fantastic night. We had Alex Fraser as our guest speaker. He is the Global Partnerships Development Director at the Liverpool Football Club. And he spoke absolutely brilliantly and provided a great sort of roadmap for people coming from Australia to London and, you know, stepping straight into executive positions, which was incredible. And then we had a lot of wonderful people working in the sports industry in the room too. So we had, we partnered on the event with the Millar Group, which is an Aussies working in sport group based over in London. If you haven't listened to Chris Dobson in episode 251, make sure you go check that out because he speaks about how to move your career to London and work in sport, and a lot about what the Millar Group does there as well. So stoked that we could partner with the Millar Group on that event and bring this event to life. Now, today, coming up on the show is one of our favourites from Sports Grad. His name's Brody Burrows. He joined Sports Grad a while ago now, and it's just been phenomenal to see how far he has taken his career. So Brody Burrows is a freelance social media producer who works with the likes of the Australian Open, Paramount Plus, covering the Socceroos. He worked with QMS covering the Paris Olympics. Also runs a very successful podcast and presence on TikTok. So he's doing a lot of very cool things. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted to get Brody on the show is because his story is absolutely remarkable. Unfortunately, a few years ago, Brody was living on a farm, grieving the devastating loss of his child and feeling pretty disconnected from his career. He didn't have a job in sport, he didn't have a media degree, and he definitely didn't have a presence on TikTok. But the thing that he did have was this like ingrained curiosity and motivation to go after his dream and really chase it hard. So at the time, that's when Brody joined Sports Grad and started posting on LinkedIn and started teaching himself everything he could about sports media and just dove headfirst into content creation, filming, editing, learning the algorithm. And that's when he started his podcast with none other than Spider Everett, former Hawthorn great, which was very cool for myself as a Hawthorn supporter to hear about. But that ended up reaching number 4 on the Australian sports podcast charts, which is just an awesome feat to be able to do. But and so through that time, he was job hunting pretty hard, getting callbacks, and just kept plugging away, but also a lot of rejections during that time too. So what he just did is he just kept building, he kept creating until eventually doors started to open. And now fast forward to today, he's a freelancer working across some of the biggest sporting events in the country and doing it all from his home on the farm, just an hour outside of Port Lincoln in South Australia, which is miles from anywhere. Have a look up Port Lincoln. It is a long way from anywhere you want to go. So have a listen to this episode. It's an awesome story of how Brody has built his career, how he's done it from a remote town, how he's overcome a lot of hardship in the process. And, if you don't leave this episode feeling inspired to go and grab your career by the horns, there's something wrong with you, seriously. So grab a pen and enjoy this chat with Brody Burrows. Brody Burrows, welcome to the Sports Grad Podcast, mate.
Thanks for having me, Rubes. It's a long time listener, first time guest. So thanks for having me on, mate.
That's right. I'm very happy to be chatting with you because you are one of the handful of people who has made like the full circle transition from listener to member to now podcast guest because of the amazing things that you're doing in the industry. So we love people who've kind of been around and we've followed for a while to see now doing awesome stuff. So yeah, keen to dive in and share more of your story.
No, sounds good, mate. Look forward to it. It's definitely a bit different to most, I'm sure, in this industry.
Well, you know this show better than most, and you know that we start every episode with a few quick-fire questions so that people can get to know you a bit better very quickly. So let's dive into that. First one I've got for you is, what inspired you to work in the sports industry?
Yeah, look, I grew up in a town of less than 100 people, not 100,000, but less than 100 people. And when you grow up in a town like that, sports it's a lifeblood of the community itself. So whether it's footy, cricket, tennis, basketball, anything that we could sort of make a competition at, you grow up playing. And in small communities, it's all run by volunteers. So look, my dad, he played 570 senior games of footy. Mum played till she was, over 50 in netball, and sisters both played high level netball as well. And you grow up in these communities, and it's all run by volunteers. And it's not just the sport, it's not just a game on the weekend. It's actually a community meeting point. And so no matter sort of what's going on in local communities, whether it's droughts, whether it's, hard times, the sporting club is what brings people together. So I fell in love with sport, just going to footy on a Saturday, and cricket, tennis, whatever it was. And I still remember, sleeping underneath the tables, as I'm sure a lot of kids out there have done when their parents play sport, and you fall asleep, you fall in love with sport. And from a young age, it was always something that I wanted to work my way into.
Amazing. For anyone who hasn't experienced country football and netball, I highly recommend you get along to it, because it is awesome to see the community at those events. Your first ever sports job?
Your first ever sports job. So in terms of an actual job I got paid for, so I used to do the scribe. So I'd actually play footy usually, and then I'd scribe for the game, which would go in the local paper, just because I was a bit of a footy nuffy, and I think everyone knew that. But I was lucky enough to sort of become a guest on a local radio show in Port Lincoln, the Saturday morning sports show, and that was from about 7 till 10, and we'd cover all local footy. We'd get guests from AFL Nation in, and then 6 months later, the main host left, and I got asked if I want to push the buttons and sort of run the ship, which was it was tough, because I was also playing music at the same time. So I'd finish gigs at maybe 1:30, 2 o'clock, get home at 3, and then be back in the radio station sort of 3 or 4 hours later, running a radio show, and then finish that, and then drive 300 k's to local footy. But look, it's what you do, and you absolutely love. And I was very lucky enough to sort of get that role.
I can imagine you were the frontman singer, or were you out the back on the drums?
No, I was playing guitar, singing a little bit, and trying to slap the bass.
Nice, very good, mate. Multi-talented. And what study did you do after high school?
Yeah, funny enough, I had a gap year, didn't really know what I wanted to do, and sort of growing up in the country, there's not that sort of push for sports media. There's really none of that here. So I actually went into primary teaching, finished that, majored in music and PE, and then, did that for about 6 months. And look, it was enjoyable, but at the same time, you know deep down that it's not what you want to do for the rest of your life. And I've heard a couple of guests that that you've had in the podcast have also done a similar thing. They've gone to primary teaching and realised it wasn't for them. So, look, did that, and since then, putted around a few odd jobs, salesman for a while, at an electrical store, believe it or not, and back on radio, and doing a few little bits in between.
Yeah, Chaim Katrib is one of the great primary school teachers who made a transition from primary school teaching into working on the Sydney 2000 Olympics, and then has worked about 12 Olympics ever since then. So you're on the same career trajectory, which is amazing to see too. In terms of interview questions, what's one that you've been asked recently to get one of the jobs you're in?
Yeah, look, there's probably a few. One that I really don't like is, what's your biggest weakness? But I've sort of learnt to come around to it a little bit, and it's probably more being open and honest. And one for me is, when I do answer this, is you got to be authentic when you give this response. Like, recruiters, they see people in there every single day. If you're going to go in there and give the same generic answer that they hear from every single person, they'll just about put a line through you. So for me, it's about being authentic. And I know one of my biggest weaknesses, especially as a content creator, is I want to sort of take on everything, and I want to be sort of in charge, and delegating sometimes is something that can be hard for me. And then on the other hand, it's sort of actually being nearly too creative and probably pushing boundaries, which I'm sure every content creator tends to do at some stage. But they're probably my two weaknesses, that sometimes making sure we go through all the approvals first before we try and push something out that could get everyone in a little bit of trouble.
You sound like a ask for forgiveness guy rather than permission guy.
That's definitely spot on, and something I've been told from before, mate.
Nice. I don't mind that, but I don't have a boss, so it works easier for me.
Perfect.
What's a book or podcast recommendation that you would want to share?
Yeah, look, for me, it's if you're going podcasting, as someone sort of in the funny social media world right now, something I've really latched onto, it's completely changed the way that sports media and especially AFL media is going, is it's Dan Does Footy. And it's completely changed the landscape of the way we consume AFL media. And there's a reason why he's number one, is because it's different. And I think us as content creators, we need to look at what Dan Gorringe has done, which seems silly, you know, anyone saying that 3 years ago. But he's completely changed the game. And I'm so happy for the way he's done it. You know, he's gone from, you know, an AFL player into now one of the biggest podcasters, biggest social media stars in the world. I've loved his story. And then in terms of books, one is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a, you know what?
We can swear on the show, it's okay.
Yeah, Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And it's a really good book. It just talks about focusing your values and working out what your values are. And, you know, if you don't value popularity, then why are you worrying sort of what other people think? Another good book is Atomic Habits, which I'm sure you probably know all about. That one there is sort of making little changes, which will turn into a big change, you know, 5-10 years down the track.
Yeah, that one's very powerful for me. And the people in the Sports Grade Method program will hear me harp on about that all day, every day. So some great recs in there. And if you could try another job in sport for a day, whose would it be?
Oh, definitely. Anyone who sort of has known me since I was about 13 or 14 know that I've dreamt of being a broadcaster or a commentator or a presenter. And I mean, there's one guy who I just adore what he does, Jared Walsh. I think he's pretty well, anytime you've heard anyone announce anything in sport, is probably Jared Walsh. Like he does the cricket, he does soccer, he does AFL, he does everything, does radio. That'd be my dream job, I think, is even presenting at the tennis as a player's walk out onto court. That would be my dream job, 100%. Yeah,
Jared's you see him everywhere. He's doing the Socceroos, he's doing the cricket. Like, you know, he's I remember he put up a LinkedIn post, either I think it was at the FIFA World Cup or at least a qualifying one, where he was like, selfie on the ground being like, this is amazing, like I know this is my job, but I'm just a fan here right now, loving life. So yeah, I'm also very envious of his job, would love to try it out for a day too.
Yeah, it'd be really good. I remember I walked past him on the way to a Port game earlier that year, and then the next week we ended up both on the exact same flight to Sydney for the Australia versus Indonesia qualifier. And it was just funny, he's gone straight from that, gone home, done his radio show, his Brekkie radio show, and then, about 3 hours later, he's on the plane to Sydney.
Quick one. Have you got your eye on a future in sport? If you're ready to transform the industry, then perhaps get ready to study with Deakin and prepare yourself to redefine what it means to work in sport. That's what I did, at least. Deakin's School of Exercise and Nutrition Sciences is ranked #1 in the world. Pretty cool, hey? So if you want to turn your passion for sport into an impactful career, get ready to push the limits of exercise science, sport coaching, sport development, sport management, nutrition sciences, physical education, and more. You can do it all at Deakin. Apply now and study at Deakin University. All right, let's dive into what you're doing at the moment, and then would love to kind of work backwards and hear about the journey of how you go from a town of 100 people, 100 kilometres north of Port Lincoln, to covering all these massive sports and international sports, which we'll get into in a sec. But how do you explain what you do to friends and family?
Yeah, this is probably the toughest question you're going to ask me all for the whole show is trying to explain what I do. But essentially, I sort of look at myself as not just a social media, but sort of a freelance sports media instead of just social media. So, and anyone who's worked in social media knows that you've got to be a jack of all trades sometimes. I mean, sometimes you're presenting in front of camera, sometimes you're talking to fans, sometimes you're editing content. So it's really hard because, I mean, just last week, I created a bunch of briefs for the Socceroos. Then at the same time, I was editing their shoot in the Adobe Suite. This week, I'm doing stuff with the Vegas Raiders. Before that, I was creating billboards for the Paris Olympics. So it's if you work in the social media industry, you've got to be able to do everything. So I think if I am going to explain it, it would be just a freelance sports media professional.
I've spoken with Alex Brown, who's worked in major publishers and with rights holders and lots of big sports, big digital media guy, and he talked about the need for people these days to be a digital all-rounder. And that kind of lends itself to what you're saying, how you need to be editing one day in front of the camera the next, and so on. Was there any particular part of that, Swiss Army knife of skills you need to have as a digital creator that you needed to work on most for you to be able to do what you do?
Mate, I'll be honest, 4 years ago, I didn't have a TikTok channel. I didn't have Instagram. I didn't have, I had an Instagram. That was about 2016 was the last time I accessed it. So look, as someone who really didn't have these, and the way I sort of got into it was I looked on LinkedIn, and this was, not long after I'd actually joined Sportsgrad, and I looked on LinkedIn and I wanted to be a sports broadcaster, and that's all I wanted to be. I wanted to be in sports radio, sports broadcasting. You type in LinkedIn and there's no jobs. Obviously, they don't advertise for these. They pick them up. Everyone's got managers. And one thing I did realise when I typed in sports media was there were so many social media jobs, working for the AFL, working for these A-League clubs, NRL teams. And I thought, right, if I want to actually work in social media, I've got to learn social media. If I've you get your foot in the door, you do a good job with that, who knows where it may lead. And looked at everything required and like, right, don't know how to do that, don't know how to do that, can't work Photoshop, can't work any of the Adobe Suite. So I jumped into every single bit of content, learnt the Adobe Suite, watched every just about YouTube video on it over the course of 6 or 8 months. And now, I'm editing, these clips and these moments that I never thought I'd even be at, let alone be capturing.
Amazing. We're going to have to clip that up and be like, How to Teach Yourself Social Media by Brody Burrows.
Yeah, maybe getting an account would actually be a good start.
Yep. Let's talk about your journey into sport. I believe an incredibly unfortunate event kind of led you to think about life in a whole new perspective and how to do it in the best way possible. Do you mind sharing kind of what sparked your road towards a career in sport?
Yeah, absolutely. Something I had to speak open about. And my wife and I, unfortunately, we lost our first child, Ellie. And yeah, once we lost her, we were both feeling really down. And you sort of don't know, we were lucky enough, we were down there in Port Lincoln, and we decided to move home back to the farm, just sort of be around family a lot more, and just to sort of plot our next steps. I think, I knew I could work on the farm until, something had come up, and I'd always loved sport, and I sort of decided to, I wanted to work in sport, but I didn't really know how. And I thought, right, I knew I could write articles, even though I hadn't done a degree per se, and been doing it since I was about 17. And I created a sports website. Contacted Spider Everett, who at that stage I'd done a bit of work with, and and he was lucky enough to jump on the podcast with me. And I think it just goes to show that you reach out to people, who knows who's going to say yes down the line. And but I'm incredibly lucky that at the time I was doing 30, 40 plus hours a week work. I'd come home, I'd put up 25 plus hours of my own writing, and that was sort of where I created a TikTok channel during this time. And there was a thing going out, I'm sure you would have done it, being a bit of a sports fan, called Gridley, and it's still around now. It's an AFL game.
I haven't seen it. No, it's an
AFL game, and it's a grid, and on one left side they'll have Hawthorn, for example, and on the top it's could have Essendon, and you got to find someone who played for Hawthorn and Essendon, and try and get the rarest score possible. So I started putting regular videos up of me doing this at the time, and sort of started 500,000, and then sort of by about 5 months later I was getting regular views of 10,000 plus, and I grew the channel to 6,500, and just by sort of putting these up daily, and also putting up some podcast clips. And this was sort of in my worst time, and I guess it was a bit of a release for me, doing something. I knew growing up, my parents called me Little Bruce. I was a bit of a nerd growing up. I could, every stat of every AFL tennis player I could sort of bring out. And I just started doing this, and somehow got a bit of a following. And then when you start applying for jobs, when you've actually got not just, a piece of paper in front of you, but people can go on, and I'm sure, you would have seen this as well. They can see you and see your brand. It completely changes the way that people are hiring now as well.
So it sounds like building up that TikTok account literally gave you a link to a portfolio of work where you're like, okay, I don't really have to do much talking here. Just look at this. Yeah,
exactly. And funny enough, the first ever job that I'd got, after the Australian Open, is when I went to do a bit of work alongside QMS. Said, are you that Gridley guy? And it was like, yeah, I am. So, we watch it in the office all the time and try and beat your score. I'm like, that's pretty cool. You know,
your reputation now.
yeah. But it's just, I think it's a little bit sort of funny how, you know, sometimes the worst things in life can just sort of, it can spark the best times. Something that I'm sure you can, you know, probably relate to, Rubes.
Yeah, that's right. No, thank you for being willing to share that as well. I think it's important and gives, like, you know, great context to people for others who are going through career change, because there are multiple people who listen to this podcast and who come through Sports Grad who are doing all different things in life and trying to consider what is the best thing for them, whether it's sport, whether it's something else, and why that's important to them too is all important in making that decision. So thank you for sharing that, mate. Okay, so you build up this TikTok following for yourself. You've now got a portfolio of work that says, you know, Brody Burrows from Port Lincoln can edit and create social media content. How does that lead to, like, the series of roles that you've had in social media since then?
Yeah, so I saw very similar to Stella, Barry, who you had on the podcast a few months ago. I saw a post on LinkedIn looking for social media access for social media creators for the Australian Open. And I saw the post and messaged the original guy who got me in touch with Justin Visser. And so, yeah, contacted JV and set up a bit of a meeting where they, you know, with him and someone else, and sort of talked about it. And I think the number one thing, and even talking to him, he picked up on was, he talked about, you know, we got talking about tennis, and for about 5 minutes, I just talked about how much I love tennis. And the year before, for our honeymoon, we went to the Australian Open for 5 days. And I still remember sort of as a young lad, you know, at 8 or 9, sneaking out, everyone's sort of going to bed and I'm sneaking out, trying to watch, you know, Leighton Hewitt, David Nalbandian, and, you know, back in 2006 or whenever it was. And just moments like that. And I think that's where it goes back to being your authentic self in these interviews and showing that you genuinely care about the job that you're applying for. And doing that, he said I was very, very lucky to sort of get a role that year as a senior social media creator. And ever since then, things have sort of fallen my way. So it's, I'm very blessed to sort of do what I do, and I don't take it lightly. It's something I never thought, a position I really never thought I'd be in 5 years ago to where I am now, but I'm very, very lucky.
You know you're in the right relationship when you don't have to negotiate to go to a sporting event for your honeymoon. So
I know.
Well done to you too. But talk to us a bit more about those social media roles at Tennis Australia. Was it just like, okay, we see you can create and we can tell that you love tennis? Was that it? Or was there anything else that kind of helped you get that job?
No, look, I think once again, having that channel and having that base behind me, one thing I do see now is a lot of people sort of applying for these social media roles. A lot of the stuff that they've put up is, you know, sort of clips from TV, and they've put a caption or something over it, which is something that anyone can do. It's sort of showing what you could bring to the table that they could post, that they could push immediately on theirs. So for me, for example, with the videos I was doing, I was splitting the screen. I was having the game on one. I was having myself sort of doing it on the other, sort of talking about it. So you could go on there, you could see I've done captions. You've worked with, you know, several other programs, and putting a face to the brand was really important for me. But yeah, at the Australian Open, still remember it like it was yesterday. I flew in 2 days before that. You know, you're moving, you know, bins and farm machinery around the farm, and then fly out at 5:30 in the morning, get to Melbourne about 8:30. Went straight to Melbourne Park, got my uniform, got changed, and then pick up our Google Pixel, which is what we film a lot of the content on the ground with. It was pretty well what we film it all with. So did that, and said, I was lucky enough. Got shown down to how to get down to Rod Laver, and they said, come down here and there's a closed training session going on, so just capture some content to put up on stories. Yeah, no worries. And walk down there, and there's a closed training, so there's just a player hitting up, and turned out to be Novak Djokovic. So here's me, 2 days ago driving around farm machinery, putting tractors in sheds, and 2 days later sitting on the sidelines capturing the GOAT. So very lucky to sort of do that. And I always believe that you go to these events, you say yes to everything. If you can't do it, you learn quickly. So you say yes to everything, and you be a good person first, and big roles will come your way.
I've got a question about some Oz Open stuff But before that, like what do people back home think of you? Because the conception of the preconception of people from the city of small country towns is that, people stay at home, they get married when they're 21, have 5 kids before 30 and just like kind of stay put. And then here you are, working with Novak Djokovic.
Yeah, I think it is pretty crazy. Like at the start, I think people were pretty surprised. I'm not sure. I don't think they believed me. I thought I was photoshopping myself into some things. But I think at the same time, I'm still, like, for those of you who don't know, I'm still living in this country town of less than 100 people. And I actually live outside of town. I still live on the farm, which I'm very lucky to do. And yeah, I think at the start people were a little bit shocked, but since then I've actually had a lot of local businesses, like a lot of local sports clubs. They message me asking for tips on their social media, and we're seeing it now, and you're probably seeing it now too. A lot of local clubs are now putting stuff out on their social media, which is great content and stuff that I love, and it is pretty cool. Like I remember over there, and I was sitting there capturing content, and I sort of filmed, panned to the crowd to capture some. And as I did it, it was our neighbours who were sitting in the crowd of less than 100 people, and I've just gone to capture some fan content. And here's some people from Lock sitting in the crowd at Melbourne Park, where we hadn't planned it or anything. And it's pretty crazy, mate. I'm very lucky, very lucky.
And then going back to the Oz Open selection process, you mentioned that you've got to have something different, something you can bring to the table. There are a lot of people, I've worked with some people who, will download content from the internet, edit it up, post it. You created that difference for yourself by getting in front of the camera and doing, working with some other different tools. Is that kind of like what it takes? Do you have to be able to do everything? Do people who are hiring social media roles prefer people who have got the ability to film on their phone as well as, get in front of it as well? What would you recommend to people trying to get into that space?
Yeah, 100%. If you're, let's say you're in Adelaide, you're in Melbourne, you really want to get into the space, think of the amount of local football clubs, cricket clubs, soccer, tennis. Go down there and have a chat to these clubs and say, can I capture some content for you? It's so much harder to capture the content at these country grounds, at these suburban footy grounds, what it is to capture them when you're sitting side by side. So if you can get some absolute gold being a social media manager at, let's say, an amateur football club, if you could just go down there and say, introduce yourself, or even if you're playing down there, should we put some content together? And that's the stuff that people are looking for. That's the stuff that really shows you think outside the square, you can get inside of the camera. But I mean, you look at every AFL, every NRL club, they're really pushing boundaries on what they're doing now. And it's not so much, I mean, if you can talk in front of a camera, great. But I think showing that you can capture at a grassroots level, whether it's trainings, miking up some players or behind the scenes stuff, I think that's where your gold can be found. And that's where you can really get a leg up on everyone else who's trying to break into the space.
And it's even more impressive because if you can get players from those teams to agree to do this content, that's a challenge in and of itself. You're not dealing with media trained athletes who know what they got to do. You're dealing with people like, don't stick a camera in front of me. I don't even have social media. Leave me alone. So if you can get them to agree to do that sort of work with you, it's another thing you can talk about.
Yeah, spot on. And I think it's a lot better now than what it was 4 or 5 years ago. Everyone's loving the content. I mean, look at the Marmalade guys, which have completely, reinvented the way social media is, and everyone loves these moments of whether you can play football at the highest level or whether you're a B grader running around in Div 12. We all love the game of footy, tennis, cricket, soccer, hockey. Find these little gems and push them out to the world. It's moments like that will make someone take notice at these events.
Back in the day, I think we're talking probably 2015, 2016, when I was volunteering on the committee of St Mary's Salesian Footy Club in the VAFA. I was running the social media and tried to recreate a segment from afl.com.au, which was called The Grill. So every week on a Wednesday or something, they'd come out with these player interviews. And I was like, why don't we do that for our club? And so I got I think it was the umpires room, set up a camera in there and got one by one to people to come in here and would ask all the players, who would you least like to, be welcomed into your family? Like, if your sister had to marry someone in the team, who would you not want it to be, or who would you love it to be? Yeah. And just all these stupid questions about the footy club at the time, which I didn't realise would be a valuable experience, but it became quite fun after that.
Yeah, exactly right. And these are the things that just by showing you have something different, everyone can do, that simple pulling, downloading videos, putting a caption up. Make it different. Do something like this, which shows your skills in not just filming, but editing, having those fun, even behind the scenes interactions where sometimes the bloopers make the best content. We see it with professionals, and you can imagine the bloopers at, these amateur levels could be twice as funny or, just more natural, something that people can relate to as well.
What do you find is one of the biggest challenges with getting into social media space in sport?
Yeah, look, the competition, especially for someone like myself, like I haven't studied in media communications. So for me, having worked alongside these sort of big events, even though I might be going for a smaller role, so you got to have a degree in a bachelor of media of communications, but that's probably my biggest barrier right now is then sort of seeing people getting junior roles. But I think one of the biggest issues is the ever-changing algorithms, mate. It's you just get your head around one thing which you think is going to do well, and then it bombs and you spend so much time on it and it just drives you up the wall. But then something that you film with an iPhone, you put up, just 30 seconds of raw footage is doing, 100, 200,000 numbers. It gets frustrating, but that's what we got to adapt and deal with. And just remember that the first 5 seconds of any content is where people are going to make their mind up to, yes, we want to watch this. Yes, we want to consume this. Or no, we're just going to flick past it. So the first 5 seconds and making every video, every bit of content, it's going to drag you in. For me, I think that's the biggest challenge.
Speaking of competition, I'm sure you're probably aware of how tough sport can be to crack when you thought about making this career change. How did you go about convincing friends, family, saying like, this is actually something I really want to dive into?
Yeah, mate. Try telling anyone from a town of, less than 100 people that you want to work in sports media without a degree in it. How do you think that'll go down? But no, look, I think people had always known, like every grand final across the Eyre Peninsula, I'd sort of get brought in to commentate it. With a few different footy leagues, and I'd come in. I've been commentating Mortlock Shield, which is like I think it's the longest running rep footy carnival in Australia. It's been going for I think close to 100 years now. So ever since I was about 18 or 19, just because being a footy nuffy, I know every transfer in every league and who's going where and who's coming in, and I've sort of been asked to sort of commentate that since I was pretty young. And I think people knew my love of sport, so they weren't surprised about sort of me going into the sports media. I think what surprised a lot of people was seeing someone who was so inept at social media get into social media. I think that's what surprised people the most. But if you're passionate about something, then you can teach yourself, because it doesn't feel like work. You're really grinding towards something that you want to do, and it doesn't feel like work. And then if you were to tell me 3 years ago that, you go and watch, every tutorial on Photoshop and every Adobe suite, and 3 years later you'll be working alongside, the Socceroos or the Olympics, I would have done that in a heartbeat any day. So it's something that, you keep learning new skills and you keep trying to adapt, and who knows where you'll end up.
Were there any moments on that journey where you felt like this is too hard, it's easier just to keep doing farm work and stay where we are? And if so, how did you push through them?
Yeah, I really did. It was probably about 12 months, and I was ready to not give up, but just sort of realise that I'm not going to make it, or get a job at the highest level, because, look where I am. I had a very supportive wife, which was, I'm very grateful for. And I still remember I recorded the podcast with Spider one day, and we were talking after we interviewed, and I sort of explained, he said, I'm just frustrated because just really want to break into this next step, and I can't, and everything that I'm doing, I just can't, I can't get there. I'm putting these applications out, and he just sort of, and he brought up an example, and he said when he was playing for St Kilda, it was a bit rough. They'd never be doing it now, but what they did is everyone on that list, they labelled them number 1 to, I think it was 38 on the list in terms of who you think's the most professional to least professional, and he come dead last at St Kilda, and he said that completely changed his outlook on life. And then he said, yeah, 2 years later, he won a best and fairest, was kicking 6 and 7s as a ruckman. He was the first one at every training, the last one at every training. He sort of a bit of a wake-up call, and he said, you keep working your ass off, someone will take notice. It won't be now, it might be 6 months, might be 12 months down the track, but you outwork everyone and someone will always take notice.
That is a great story. I didn't know that about Spider, and Hawthorn got his best years after that, right? So thank you, St Kilda, for that. But as you mentioned that, it kind of reminded me of something I went through in my career where probably my first year in the job at Cricket Australia was put into a meeting with the sponsors of Cricket Australia. It was with Alinta Energy. And I, being like, the junior burger in the room, got handed something to update, the head of sponsorship at Alinta Energy, whose sponsorship is worth, multiple millions of dollars. So there's all these big fancy people in there, and I had to deliver this little line. And for the entire meeting, I was like just shitting myself, like, what do I do? And could feel this anxiety build up in my chest to the point where I was like, okay, now it's my time to speak. And when I started speaking, I just kind of felt the weight of the room looking at me, to the point where my anxiety cut me off and I stopped talking. And I was like, oh God, how do I rescue myself from this? I can't. And thank God my boss jumped in and saved it from there. But I remember going home that night and went to the Woolies near my house, grabbed a bag of popcorn and sat in the park. And my girlfriend at the time called me and she was like, Ruben, where are you? I'm like, I'm sitting in a park eating popcorn, feeling sorry for myself because I'm shit at my job. And after that, I was like, I never want to be unprepared for a meeting ever again. I never want to feel that stupid again. So, yeah, cool to hear that Spider Effort's gone through something similar, but you don't have to be a professional athlete for that to relate. I'm sure everyone listening's got something in their life where they're like, okay, that was the moment where I was like, all right, things are going to change.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where sort of my latest role with Paramount Plus. So I was originally brought in just doing game day stuff. So what that was is sort of that's clipping from Grabyo or WSC. And for those listeners that sort of don't know what that is, it's pretty well like a live streaming platform where we clip up 30-second minute clips of the highlights, whether it's goals. So what you see with AFL, tennis, soccer, it's just sort of those highlight goals, and then it posts directly to social media channels. And I was sort of just doing that for the game day things, working from home, and messaged the Cass, the boss at SDA, and said, look, I think the way we're going about these is it's a long way around. I think we could streamline it by doing this, this, and this, and not part of my job. Like I said, I've just brought in for game day stuff, and by sending that, I ended up. She said, "Oh, how would you streamline it?" And you sort of explained the way that we can sort of change a few things, and then just by doing that, we're sort of brought on in a bigger role. And 3 months down the track, I'm at the Socceroos working alongside them, director of football alongside Paramount Plus.
For those who don't know SDA, Sport Design Australia, they're doing some incredible work based in Sydney. I'm actually going to see them tomorrow, which I'm excited for. Can you tell us about them and how you got connected with them and the opportunities that's brought you in your career? Yeah,
definitely. Before I start, they are, Cass. Cass is sort of my boss directly, and I know we sort of talked about this off air. She's an absolute weapon in this sports field, and look, three of them, they all sort of work together in the NRL, and they decided to sort of create an agency outside. And look, I've never met three more passionate people across the sports media landscape, but at the same time, three people who are just genuine. And one thing I've found in this sports industry is people who are genuine will always go further than people who are I suppose driven. If you're genuine and good at your job, you're always going to get picked over someone else. And one thing, they care about their workers, but they, at the same time, they put out some amazing content and work with some amazing brands. So after I worked with the Olympics, I had someone who sort of recruited me for that say, oh, here's another job. Just saw this come across my LinkedIn feed and flicked it to me. So I applied and got I think it was an email back maybe about a week later, and was on a Zoom call with the team. And from there, so we sort of talked about if we were football fans. And once again, I just went on a bit of a tangent about seeing a football game, Adelaide United versus Melbourne Victory, and flares getting let off in the crowd when I was about 9 or 10, and fell in love with it. And it's just moments like that. So got hired just to do a bit of game day stuff, and from there it's definitely grown.
How do you go, that is an incredible story, and kind of proves the power of networking, knowing the right people, but also making sure you're doing a good job at the same time through it so you can keep accelerating. Given you are a long way away from any city, just to paint a picture, how far from Adelaide is Port Lincoln?
So it's about a 7.5 hour drive, about a 7 hour drive. Or if you want to take a plane flight, I'll drive an hour and a half to Port Lincoln. And I think it's the most expensive plane flight per kilometre in Australia. So it's about a 30-minute plane flight and you're not getting returned for under $450.
So given how remote you are, how do you go with networking in sport?
Yeah, mate, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is, it's like my Facebook. I spend more time on that than, when I'm not actually working in social media. It's so important, and it is really, it's a free accelerator. I mean, you see jobs on there, you see people and their work, and I mean, I've not stolen, but there's so many people who I follow on LinkedIn that I sort of take what they're doing and bring it into my career and what I do, and it's pretty incredible. Then you look back and some of the people that are sort of commenting on your stuff and liking your stuff and sharing, and it's pretty amazing. Like, most recently, I caught up with Yuri Bilcic, who I know is a big, long-time sports grad member and one of the most hardest working people in in this sports section that I've ever dealt with. And we worked together on this QMS project, which I was lucky enough to bring him in for, which is something that was pretty cool. And caught up with him over in Perth, and even though we sort of felt like we knew each other for 3 or 4 years, but met up over there for the first time. And it's just so important, LinkedIn, and I can't push it out enough, that especially for someone like me who I can't get out to these conferences, these sports events, these sports networking events all the time, but this is where, for me, and I know lately I've been pretty bad at it, because when you work in social media, mate, as I'm sure you know, that's kind of the last thing you want to do when you when you knock off. But it's something that I'm incredibly grateful for. It's really changed my journey, and I don't reckon I definitely wouldn't have probably got the job at the Australian Open without it, because I wouldn't have seen it, and without that first job at the Australian Open, I wouldn't be where I am now.
Firstly, shout out to Yuri Bilcic and the great man over in Perth, doing some great work, and long-time listener. How do you go about using LinkedIn? Like, are you on every day just kind of browsing to see what's going on? Are you messaging people? Are you posting? Like, what does your use of LinkedIn look like that's led to the opportunities that you found? Yeah,
it's really changed for me. So I think when I first started, I was connecting with a lot of people. I was sending out a lot of messages, for advice, saying and pushing out to a lot of people and wanting to catch up for coffees and a lot of things. Whenever I was in Adelaide, I'd try, and I think I don't even drink coffee, but those 3 days in Adelaide, mate, I drank more coffees than I ever have in my life, just so I didn't feel bad. So I still remember sitting down. I've sat down with Timmy Ginniver, who really sent me on a really good track, and so open and gives his time to so many young sports professionals. Anyone who doesn't know Timmy, is a Port Adelaide Football Club legend, absolute star on 5AA for Adelaide Radio, sports radio, can call footy, is just one of the most nicest human beings out. I caught up with him, and he said something similar to Spider, said sort of just keep working your butt off, and someone will take notice somewhere, and might not be one thing, but you'll get noticed. And then sort of it's been a bit of a full circle moment for me, and sort of once I did start to get hired, and I started posting sort of everything that I was doing, and not just that, but the metrics that went along with it. So first year on the Australian Open, we were lucky enough to sort of break all socials records, and not just posting sort of what I did and some cool photos of me backstage, but also Instagram numbers were up 33%. Followers are up this much compared to last year. Reels, retention rate. Start going in depth about your analytics, and people start to realise, he's not just there sort of for the experience, but he's there to actually make the company and the event a lot better as a whole.
Yep. When you were like in your peak networking phase, so to speak, like how many messages in a month were you sending out to people?
15 to 20.
Yep.
I'd probably say, and it would really depend on. Mate, if I was going to Adelaide and knew I had a weekend in Adelaide, I'd probably double it, because if you
you'd send off 30 messages to try and fill 2 days. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And That was a whole different bunch of people. That was people who, digital media producers at AFL clubs. That was radio. That was AFL journalists. That was everyone in between that had sort of worked in sport. And just, you don't know what will stick with you. And it's sometimes it's someone who has nothing to do with sport that will leave the biggest impact on and give you the best advice moving forward.
And when you're like trying to pitch yourself to get time with people on their weekend, which can be harder than during the week, what were you using in your message to try and create these opportunities?
I was just honest. I said, look, mate, I'm someone from the Eyre Peninsula on a farm trying to make my way into sports media. Would love to catch up if you've got a time for a coffee. If not, if you want to catch up over Zoom, I'll fit you into sort of like whenever suits you, if that was possible. If not, thanks and love what you're doing. Sort of, even if you can't catch up, I think you still acknowledge what they're doing and that they're sort of a leader in the field too.
I love that, like, you've lent into your story there, because like if you send that to me and I heard like how far you were traveling and like where you were living and your aspirations beyond this town of 100 people, I'd be like, yeah, I want to get on this guy's story and help him out. So I love that you included that as well, and well played to where you've got to now with it. Let's dive into like some of the work that you do at the moment and have continued to upgrade on what you do. You mentioned analytics before. What have some of the past roles that you've had taught you about the best ways to track, record, or use analytics to improve your social media output?
Yeah, like I said before, the first 5 seconds I really noticed early when I started creating, TikToks, Instagram. The first 5 seconds, and I know I'm guilty of it. If something doesn't capture my attention straight away, I'm usually flicking through it. And then I think when it comes down to social media, think of content that you would enjoy. I think we get so stuck, especially as content creators, trying to create the perfect bit of content, when really we've got to realize that we are fans too, the ones that are creating it. What would we like to see? What would get our attention? And it's something that I know I struggled with, because I was, especially at the start, I wanted everything to be perfect because I was so desperate to stay in this industry that I've somehow been given a chance in, when it's like, no, you're a fan. You're someone who loves tennis. You're someone who loves sport. You're someone who loves AFL. What would you enjoy? And then you start thinking about, I'm a fan of this. I know this about someone. Let's chuck their nickname in. Let's chuck for example, you're working in tennis. You're talking about tweeners. You're talking about AFL. You start using, I remember Michael Walters and calling him Sonny, and then Fremantle, that they reshare it. And by putting these nicknames, and you're engaging not only the I suppose the casual fan, but the real diehard fans, because they know that, this guy knows what they're talking about with their content. This guy is sort of legit. So I think it's really leaning into content that I create is stuff that's relevant for you, stuff that's relevant and you would like to see. And that's completely changed the way I've sort of started creating.
Well, Steve Jobs said that, if he asked a customer what he wanted, he would have never invented the iPhone. And even if you look in the music industry too, like legendary music producer Rick Rubin says, the last person I'm listening to is the audience. Like, I'm creating for myself. And then I'm an Oasis fan. I think it's Liam Gallagher, maybe Noel, but he said, fuck the customer. The customer doesn't know what he wants.
That sounds like Oasis.
Yeah, I think he says, you give it to him and he likes it. It's that simple.
Yeah, exactly.
But social media these days is an art form, so there's an element of create what feels good for you. And I know certainly the best times that I've enjoyed creating content too have been when it's for me. I'm I'm really going to enjoy this, and I feel like this is something I want to look back on in a year's time, just to be that was when I did that thing. And those have usually gone the best too. So it's cool to see how it's related to your content as well.
Yeah, it was. I was lucky enough to do a shoot the day after the Socceroos game in Perth with that beach going. Did a shoot with the boys, and it was all about capturing, those short form content clips you see alongside Paramount Plus. And went in there, and when I first started doing these, it was I was a little bit nervous and said, not robotic, but sort of wanted everything to be perfect for the camera. And as they come in, we've just turned our briefs right around to, we're going to have some absolute fun with these guys. And I mean, they're on top of the world. They just won the night before, just about qualifying for the World Cup. So we know that, everything's going to be fun. They're going to be in great moods. So I probably shouldn't say what we're going to do, because it's just about to be put out across socials. But you make it fun for them and realise they're genuine people too. Like people that you're working with, the people that you're interviewing, they want to enjoy this. And if the person who's watching it through the screen can tell that the target is having fun, there's I reckon 200% more chance that they're going to sit around and watch this video.
So when you are creating for Paramount or for the Australian Open or anybody, and maybe not the Australian Open because I'm guessing it goes for 2 weeks. They're not having like a weekly report meeting because it's just so like in the moment, I'm guessing. But like when you are looking at the performance of previous posts, are you going question to you, what stats are you looking immediately at? Is it that 5-second retention rate? Is it anything else? What are the ones you look at in the moment?
Look, I think it really depends. Like, for example, with Paramount Plus, our weeks it'd be like a roller coaster if you look at it. It'd be like the worst stock market. Like if you were to buy a stock, it's the stock you'd never want to buy because one week, for example, there'd be a Matildas or a Socceroos game and everything would go through the roof. The next week, it's just your A-leagues and it's steady. And then all of a sudden there's a scorpion kick or something. And then, that's going to go viral. So I think at times you've got to know that the content, what you're putting out, and it's never easy, especially in the sports world, to try and explain it to higher ups is when you're working with something that can't be controlled, there's going to be unusual numbers all the time. There's going to be some weeks where you're going to break every single record and then they're going to want you to keep doing that, but you can't tell players. You can't control what players do, and we're pulling it directly from. I mean, we can put these clips in between that we think might go well, but at the same time, when you're capturing live sport and live moments, sometimes you've got to think outside the square. It could be Hawthorn, GWS, they're doing it really well. Little memes, little things to sort of spike something, spike a different audience or just bring other people in. But yeah, in terms of analytics, mate, you've just got to make it clear. And that's one thing that I've always tried to do is when working in live sport, there's always going to be outliers and explain why. And that's one thing that I've sort of done well, or I think I've done well is, we're down 170% this week on our views, which sounds like a massive amount, but that's because Aziz Bayic kicked a goal to guarantee us into a World Cup last week. If you know what I mean, and we put out 6 clips around that, and each one was doing over 1 million views or something along those lines. Is explaining the outliers is when you do have a down week, when you do have a good week as well. So then everyone's on the same page when it does come. Maybe beforehand, maybe 2 weeks later.
Yeah, I remember back in the day when I was doing all the stats for the Cricket Australia digital team and would send out the digital weekly report of all the numbers. And one thing my boss taught me to show change was look at test match on test match. Don't look at like month on month. Compare the Adelaide Test this year to the Adelaide Test last year, and even like series on series. So when was what were the numbers the last time we played India versus the last time we played West Indies, because that has an effect on the numbers too. So yeah, you're right. It is so unpredictable. And for anyone who wants to learn more about GWS Giants and the way they do content, we spoke to Jacob Gaynor, their head of content, back in, I'm going to say episode 286 last year, but that was our most popular episode of 2024, which I'm sure you would have listened to.
Yeah, 100%. Love GWS content. Love that. Very similar in a Dan Gorringe sort of way, changed the way that we sort of absorb footy media and in all the serious shows, and that sort of goes around. It's we definitely need a bit more laughter, I think, in the serious sports world sometimes.
Amazing, mate. So if not for the numbers on social, what does success look like?
Yeah, I think engagement is a big one. So yes, everyone can watch your clip, but how many people are gonna really engage with it? So back at the Australian Open last year, we sort of looked at. So I worked in Blue Zone, and what Blue Zone was, it was pretty like an 8-hour TV show special. So the first 4 hours was more of a serious tennis show, hosted by Blair Henley and Adam Peacock. And then the second half was Loose Goose. It was El Ray, Ben Abbott, and Jad from Gogglebox as well. And they'd sort of be sitting there watching, and we'd, putting up a bunch of social clips that sort of go along with this. And yeah, so for us, it was we did a top 5 social clips from the Australian Open on the final day, and we're like, right, the most viewed. the most viewed clip wasn't the most engaged. What are we going to go by? And I thought, no, I'm going to go by the most engaged because that's how many people actually engaged with the video itself. And that was, I'm sure you remember, Carlos Alcaraz and Little John, the ball boy who he obviously did the coin toss and then he skipped away and then they met up afterwards. And then number 2 was Danielle Collins when she slapped her bum and really rolled up the crowd But then by sharing this, it's not just, for example, you're always going to get those countries or that have more fans and they're just going to get around a certain player and watch their video. But in terms of reactions, in terms of things that people love that they're sharing, I think that's what I go by if I'm going by analytics is how many people engaged and are really interested in the content that you're putting out.
Mate, your job is super interesting. There's so many different sides to it. And when you work with, football and NFL coming up, which is super exciting, and tennis and AFL, there's so many different perspectives and so many different things you're learning, so many things that go into it. Far beyond what I can possibly understand to ask you, which is why I'm going to borrow a question that I got asked to me at a dinner party I was at recently. So, you pull out one of those card games just to create conversation. It came from there, which is the question was what is something that you wished more people asked you about?
I think that's a really, really good question, actually. I think it's more what changed to make you go down this, this path. And it was, to me, I'd always wanted to work in sport media, but I had no idea how to do it. And at the time I thought, I'm living here. I can't do it. But like we touched on earlier, it took a bad moment. I think I've got nothing else to I was in a bad place and I sort of talked about it, I've got nothing else to sort of lose. If this doesn't happen, well, it doesn't matter because I can't go any lower. And I know that sounds pretty bad, but that was the sort of light bulb moment. Like if I don't do it, then it doesn't matter because it sort of can't go any worse for me. And it's sorry to bring a bit of a downer to it, but at that moment, it was like, well, if that didn't happen, would I be where I am now? And I think I'm so open about it because it's led me down this amazing path.
How old were you at the time when you went through this?
So we were, I was at 20, it was 5 years ago now, so I was 25.
Yep. Because I speak to a lot of people who literally get to 25 and they're like, oh, Ruben, my life's pretty much set in stone. Life's over, I can't change or can't go after my dreams now. But that's why I love hearing stories about like yours and particularly horribly what you had to go through is awful, but the fact that it sparked you to go on this incredible journey in your career since then is a great testament to yourself, but also an amazing inspiration for other people who think this is the way that life has always got to be now. It's no, you can decide what to do next, which has led you to where you are now. Which on that note, if you had to nail down one particular moment as your ultimate pinch me moment where given where I've come from, given everything that I've been through, how the hell did I get here? What is that moment for you?
Oh, mate. Going courtside capturing Novak Djokovic was pretty cool. The other one was like I said, at the Australian Open as well. Australian Open was great. I can sort of bring out 3 or 4 from them as well. But this latest Socceroos one, hearing 60,000 Australian fans, I think there might have been lucky to be 500 or 1,000 Japanese fans, but everyone there and anyone who's been to Optus Stadium can say it's built like a coliseum and it sounds so much louder than what it is. And when that goal went in, you're sitting there, you're live, and there's something on the back of your neck, and it's something I'll remember forever. And now that's going to live on, like that Aloisi goal that got us in, and it's going to like Andrew Redmayne's wiggle dance. But the next day, sort of coming in and everyone was up and about, and I remember everyone was coming in and they're just dapping us up, and there's Lewis Miller, there's all of these Socceroos players coming in and talking to them, and they sort of want to sit down and watch the next guys and waiting for him to sort of come up. I just got talking to Joe Gauchi, obviously pretty big name, and got talking to him and sort of asked us, you travel with the team, you travel with Paramount Plus? I was like, nah, mate, I was 2 days ago I was on the farm and driving tractors. And he's like, what? And hearing them sort of wanting to know sort of about me was something that was I'll never imagine. But yeah, it's really cool sort of being able to not just deal with these players, but realise that they're just like us, only a lot better at sport. But they're some of the most genuine people. Is people who I've met, and sort of seeing the way that they interact with staff behind the scenes when the cameras aren't rolling with ball kids, and that's some of the moments that I treasure most. Is yes, we all see the cool moments and the behind the scenes moments and stuff that we capture. But for me, and something that I absolutely love is seeing the way that they interact with everyone else, and that's something that I just love. Sort of coming from nothing and coming from where you treat everyone the same no matter where they come from. That's something that I just adore.
Well, these are moments you deserve, mate, given how hard you've worked and what you've been through and what you've done to create the career you've got for yourself, which is amazing. And I totally agree with you. Like those moments you get with those players where you just or just connected with anybody in the industry, where you find you're just a genuine, real person. Similarly, when I was working on the T20 World Cup, I had the captain of the UAE come to me after making a duck and then two, and then we're walking out of a hotel in Geelong, and he says, "Ruben, how do I bat on the pitches in Australia?" I'm like, "How am I going to help you?" And if you want the extended story to that, go back and listen to the episode I did where I tell my story of my career in sport. But again, that's one of the memories I hold closest to me. But and it's cool to see how you're having those similar moments with the Socceroos at the moment too. So, are you going to get over to the World Cup in USA, Mexico, Canada next year?
Yeah, hopefully, mate. Hopefully I'll be over there if something doesn't come up before then. But yeah, look, as someone sort of growing up in the country, we sort of didn't have a soccer club nearby. I was just falling in love with it. Anyone who's never been to a soccer or football, or depends where you're from, game, just try and get around our national teams. I mean, we all saw what the Matildas have done. They put Australia on their back, and I think there's a football culture in Australia is turning at the moment for the better, and I think we get behind our national teams as much as we can.
Amazing, mate. If you didn't decide to go down this path, where do you think you'd be now?
Mate, I'd probably be sitting on a tractor right about now, doing some stone rolling or chucking some seed in the ground, which I still do from time to time. But every harvest, I still jump on there and on the header. But yeah, I'd probably be doing that, listening to podcasts non-stop, I reckon.
Well, don't ever lose that, because that's who you are, with a bit of sports media on top, which we love. So, Brody, thanks so much for jumping on the podcast, mate. Been a pleasure to have more of an extended chat with you. Obviously, I've known you over the years, dipping in and out of sports grad and seeing you around and following the career that you've created for yourself, which is just a joy to watch from afar, but to kind of hear the ins and outs of it has been super cool for myself. And very excited to see where you go next, because, to be honest, you are just starting, and media's only going to get bigger, and you've created a great platform for yourself to launch from. So thanks for jumping on, and I'll catch you soon.
Nah, sounds good, mate. Thanks for the opportunity, and all the best for sports grad.
Hey, last thing before you go. Everyone knows the sports industry is super competitive, so you might want to keep this to yourself. But every Monday, I send out an email called Shortcuts by SportsGrad. It takes 5 minutes to read, and it gives you everything you need to get an edge over other job hunters on a silver platter. Here you'll find exclusive job opportunities, networking events, and premium resources to get ahead. Again, it takes less than 5 minutes to read, and it's designed to help you get ahead and stay ahead. So if you want to receive the next one in your inbox, head to sportsgrad.com.au/newsletter. But as I mentioned, competition for jobs in sport is red hot, so perhaps keep this to yourself.